When Clara suspects her husband James of cheating with his female colleague, their quiet marriage begins to unravel. But not every late night hides a lie, and not every suspicion leads to the truth. What if the real betrayal was mistrust? Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The alarm buzzed faintly just after 6:30 a.m., a low hum vibrating against the oak nightstand. James Matthews stirred beneath the duvet, reaching out instinctively to silence it. Beside him, Clara let out a soft sigh and shifted under the covers, pulling them tighter around her body. He watched her for a moment, the way the morning light spilled across her face, softening the lines near her eyes, and felt the same quiet gratitude he often did in the earliest part of the day. He leaned over and pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "I'm getting up," he whispered. Clara mumbled something in reply, half protest, half contented murmur, then settled deeper into sleep. James stepped into his slippers and moved through the hallway with practiced steps, avoiding the creaky floorboard near the bathroom door. Downstairs, the kitchen welcomed him with its usual stillness. He flipped on the lights, filled the kettle, and stood waiting as the water began to boil, the sound of it slowly filling the room. He liked mornings like this. Predictable, peaceful. With 2 steaming mugs in hand, he returned upstairs. Clara was sitting up now, hair mussed, pulling her robe tighter around her as she stretched. "You're early," she said, her voice still thick with sleep. James handed her the mug, the one with the worn floral print and a chip on the lip she never seemed to notice. "Client meeting at 9. Thought I'd beat the traffic." Clara took the coffee and gave a small smile. "You always beat the traffic. You're practically allergic to being late." He chuckled and sat beside her, their shoulders brushing. For a minute, neither of them spoke, just sipped their coffee in the quiet morning light. "What's on today?" she asked, eyes scanning the window as a soft rain began tapping against the glass. "Final prep for the Malvern pitch," James said, rubbing his thumb along the handle of his mug. "Vanessa and I are presenting it to the execs Monday. We're running through the layout again today. She wants to rework the tagline." "Vanessa," Clara repeated, like she was tasting the name. "The new strategist?" "Yeah," James said casually. "Pretty sharp. She's helped organize the whole thing. It's running a lot smoother than I expected." Clara nodded slowly, taking another sip. "You've mentioned her a few times." James didn't catch the subtle change in her tone. Or maybe he did, but brushed past it. "She's just easy to work with," he said. "Keeps things moving. Doesn't drag decisions out the way Graham used to." Clara said nothing at first. She leaned back against the headboard, her expression unreadable, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. James stood and stretched. "I should get moving. That report isn't going to rewrite itself." He dressed quickly, moving through his closet with deliberate economy, gray slacks, a white button-down navy tie. Clara sat watching him from the bed, one leg pulled beneath her. As he adjusted the collar of his shirt, she spoke again. "Do you like working with her?" James turned, confused by the question. "Vanessa." Clara shrugged. "You talk about her a lot." He paused, looking at her for a beat longer than usual. "She's good at her job," he said evenly. "But no, I like coming home a lot more." Her lips twitched into something resembling a smile. Still, something remained unsaid between them. Downstairs, James grabbed his bag, wallet, and keys from the entryway table. Clara followed behind him, arms folded loosely over her chest. He turned to her before opening the door. "I'll be home around 8, maybe later. Don't wait up if it runs long." "I won't," she said. She leaned in to kiss him, a familiar motion, but this time it felt just a little delayed, just slightly measured. James stepped out into the gray morning, the rain misting gently as he walked toward his car. Clara stood by the front window, watching him pull out of the driveway. Her hand pressed lightly to the curtain's edge. Something about the way he had said her name, Vanessa, lingered in her mind. Not louder, not softer, just familiar. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt too quiet. The rain had turned into a cold drizzle by evening, veiling the neighborhood in a silver hush. Streetlights glowed like silent sentinels, their reflections stretching in pale ribbons across the wet pavement. Inside the house, Clara stood barefoot in the kitchen, her arms wrapped around herself as she watched the microwave count down. The smell of garlic and roasted vegetables hung in the air. Dinner for two, prepared out of habit more than certainty. It was nearly 8 p.m. She hadn't received a second text from James. Only the one at 5:46. Still at the office. Vanessa and I are going through the pitch again. Might be late. No love you. No miss you. Just that, informational. Neutral. The microwave beeped. Clara didn't move right away. She stared at the door instead, half expecting it to open in that exact moment, like a scene from a movie. But the only sound was the hum of the appliances and the distant patter of rain. With a quiet sigh, she plated her own food and poured a glass of wine. Syrah, 2 days open. She brought both to the living room and curled onto the corner of the couch, the TV casting low flickers of light across the walls. The voices from the screen were muted in her ears. Her mind was elsewhere. Her phone sat on the coffee table, face down. She picked it up, unlocked it, opened Instagram. Scrolling came easy. Muscle memory. Half-conscious. She thumbed through a few photos, double-tapping out of obligation more than interest. Then a post from James's company's page caught her eye. Teamwork makes the dream work. Prepping for Monday's big pitch with the Malvern team. Briefcase lightbulb #office grind. It was a casual group shot. For people, 3 laptops, a conference table strewn with coffee cups and printed mock-ups. And there he was, James, smiling, tie loosened, leaning slightly toward the woman beside him. Vanessa, presumably. Her head tilted just so, laughing at something someone had said, a red pen poised in her hand. Their bodies didn't touch, but the space between them was small. Intimate in a way that felt unintentional, which somehow made it worse. Clara stared. Not long. Just enough. She clicked on the company's tagged photos and scrolled. Vanessa had been tagged in 3 recent posts. In all of them, she stood beside James. Always beside James. Always in the same proximity. Like 2 pieces of a set. She shut the app. The wine tasted more acidic than she remembered. Upstairs, Clara sat on the edge of the bed with her laptop open, a manuscript blinking at her with a blank cursor. She tried to focus. She couldn't. Her thoughts kept drifting, imagining what their conversation sounded like, what jokes they were sharing, what she looked like when she smiled at him. At 9:12 p.m., the front door finally clicked open. She heard James kick off his shoes, drop his keys in the ceramic bowl. A rustle of his coat. She didn't call down to him. She waited. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway, hair damp from the rain, blazer folded over one arm. "Hey," he said, voice light, as though he hadn't just been gone all evening. "Sorry, Vanessa wanted to do another round of edits on the slide order. Took longer than expected." Clara glanced up from her screen, managing a nod. "Everything go well?" "Yeah. I think we've got it locked in. Just have to finalize the print versions and make sure the delivery flow makes sense." She marked a line in the document with her red pen, more forcefully than needed. "You've been working with her a lot." James blinked, caught off guard. "Well, yeah. She's the strategist on this campaign." "She must be impressive," Clara said, her tone carefully neutral. He shrugged out of his dress shirt, tossing it gently into the laundry hamper. "She's fine. Organized. Intense, maybe. But in a good way." Clara stood and crossed the room, intending to grab her phone charger. But as she passed him, she caught a faint scent in the air. It wasn't cologne. It was floral. Soft. Not hers. She turned slightly, trying to appear casual. Is that perfume? James lifted his shirt and sniffed the collar. Huh. Maybe. Vanessa gave me a ride back to my car. Mine was in the shop for an oil change. She probably wears something. Didn't notice. Clara said nothing. Just nodded once, her back to him. He noticed her silence then. Really noticed it. You okay? He asked. She turned, offered a small smile. Just tired. James stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on her back. Long day. She nodded again. He kissed her temple, the same place he always did. Let's sleep in tomorrow. No alarms. Just us. She leaned into the gesture, but something had already settled in her chest. Something small. Sharp. Wordless. And it would not let her rest. The wind had shifted by morning, bringing a cold snap that clung to the windows and curled around the eaves like a warning. Clara sat at the small cafe on Bellamy Street, her hands wrapped around a paper cup, the coffee inside slowly losing its heat. Across from her, Nina tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and leaned in, lowering her voice even though no one sat near them. So let me get this straight, Nina said. He's working late with this Vanessa woman every other night, and you're just supposed to believe it's all business? Clara didn't respond right away. She was staring through the window, watching a couple walk past holding hands, their coats pressed together against the wind. He hasn't given me a reason not to believe him, she said finally, as if trying to convince herself more than Nina. That's not what you told me last night. Clara exhaled, then looked at her friend. It's just little things. The perfume. How often he says her name. That look on his face when he talks about her, like the rest of the world vanishes. He used to talk about me like that. Nina reached for her cup, tapping her thumbnail against the lid. I'm not saying he's cheating, Clara, but something's off. And you feel it, don't you? Clara nodded. Slowly, almost imperceptibly. Yeah, I do. Nina leaned back, arms folded. Then pay attention. Start with his phone. People don't guard their innocence. They guard their secrets. Clara flinched at that. You're asking me to snoop? I'm asking you to know what you're dealing with, Nina said. If it's nothing, you can let it go. But if it's something... Clara stirred her coffee with the wooden stir stick. The liquid swirled, but her thoughts remained static. She hated this creeping sense that she had become someone else. The kind of woman who checked her husband's phone when he was in the shower, who second-guessed smiles and calendar entries and shifts in tone. But she also hated the not knowing. The way suspicion made a home behind her ribs, whispering doubts into every moment of silence. Back at home, Clara waited until James left for the gym before slipping into his office. She had told herself it was only curiosity, only precaution, but her heart pounded as if she were committing a crime. His laptop was open on the desk, the screen still lit from earlier. A calendar window blinked back at her. She scrolled through upcoming meetings. Friday night, Malvern final walkthrough Vanessa. She moved the mouse to his inbox. No password. He never used one at home. His email was as professional as expected. Clean. Efficient. But there, thread after thread, all marked with a tiny V. Dozens of messages. She clicked on one. It was about design formats. Then another, presentation timing. And then one more. This one was shorter. Sent at 10:53 p.m., 2 nights ago. Appreciate you staying late again. Couldn't do this without you. Honestly, I don't know how anyone else manages without a James on their team. I owe you a drink once we survive Monday. V. Clara read the message twice. Then again. It wasn't explicit. It wasn't even flirtatious, really. But it was intimate. Too casual. Familiar in a way that curled something inside her. She closed the laptop and sat back, the room silent except for the hum of the central heating. Her phone buzzed on the table. James, still want me to grab Ty for lunch? She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then she typed, "Sure. You know what I like." She didn't add a heart this time. Later that afternoon, she stood at the sink, rinsing off the lunch containers after they'd eaten mostly in silence. James was in the living room, scrolling through slides on his laptop, half humming a song she didn't recognize. From the kitchen, Clara watched him, his posture, his soft frown of focus, the occasional glance at his phone. She couldn't see anything different about him. Not his voice, not his movements. He looked like the same man who danced with her barefoot in this kitchen 6 years ago, laughing at nothing, swaying to no music. And yet something had shifted. Something invisible. Something heavy. She dried her hands and turned back to the sink, blinking fast as the window blurred before her. James had always kept Sunday mornings sacred. No emails. No meetings. No spreadsheets. Just coffee, crossword puzzles, and jazz humming from the Bluetooth speaker in the corner of the kitchen. It was his ritual, a small rebellion against the pace of the rest of the week. But this Sunday, the jazz never made it on. Clara stood at the sink, washing a glass with more force than necessary. Water splashed up the front of her sweatshirt, but she didn't flinch. Across the room, James sat at the island with his laptop open, scrolling through presentation notes. "You're working again," she said, too flatly for it to sound like a question. James glanced up. "Just a quick run-through." Vanessa sent over the latest layout. "She restructured the flow a bit, so I need to." Clara turned off the tap with a sharp flick. "You and Vanessa," she interrupted. "It's always you and Vanessa lately." James looked at her, surprised by the sudden edge in her voice. "She's the campaign lead," he said slowly. "We're trying to land a $500,000 account. You know how this works." Clara dried her hands on a dish towel, movements brisk. "I do. I know how it works. I just don't remember the last time I felt like your wife and not someone watching from the sidelines while you orbit around her schedule." He blinked. Sat back. "Where is this coming from?" Clara dropped the towel on the counter and crossed her arms. "From the fact that you're never home. From the way you light up when you talk about her. From the perfume on your shirt. From her giving you rides. From emails that sound more like date follow-ups than campaign planning." James straightened, stunned. "Wait, are you going through my emails now?" The room fell into a sudden, suffocating stillness. Clara's jaw tightened. "I looked. Once. Because I needed to see if I was imagining things." "And," his voice was low now, quiet and sharp, "she said she owes you a drink." Clara's tone curled with sarcasm. "But sure, it's all just campaign flow." James stood slowly, closing the laptop with a calmness that felt more dangerous than anger. "I've done nothing wrong, Clara. You don't see how it looks?" Her voice cracked, the frustration breaking through. "You don't see how you've shut me out while inviting her in?" James's face twitched, hurt, disbelief, maybe both. "I come home to you. I make time for you. I talk to you about my day, even when I'm exhausted. And you know what I get in return? Suspicion. Interrogation. A war over what I smell like." Clara folded her arms tighter, as if trying to hold herself together. "Because I don't feel like I'm part of your life anymore. Just the part you come back to after the real part ends." James looked at her then, not with anger, but with a strange kind of sorrow. Like he was looking at someone he didn't recognize. "I thought we trusted each other." "I thought I did too," Clara whispered. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Instead of arguing, instead of defending himself, he picked up his coffee, walked to the back door, and stepped outside into the cold. The door shut behind him with a click that sounded louder than it should have. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the place where he'd just been. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind of silence that filled the space where love had once lived freely, and now stood waiting to be invited back in. The guest room was quiet, lit only by the street lamp outside, its glow spilling in through the half-open blinds in a narrow band of yellow. James lay on top of the neatly made bed, fully dressed, his arms folded behind his head. The house around him was still. Too still. He could hear the soft whir of the heater, the occasional creak in the floorboards above, and his own breathing, measured but shallow. 3 nights on this bed now. 3 nights since the fight in the kitchen. Since Clara's voice cracked, and his silence hit the floor between them like a dropped plate. Neither had apologized. Neither had tried. There'd been small exchanges, dinners in the fridge. Did you feed the cat? But they all felt like formalities. Business between 2 people who used to be something else. Down the hall, Clara lay curled beneath their shared duvet. She had left his side of the bed untouched. Not a single pillow moved. Not a wrinkle out of place. It was easier than facing the ache of absence. She stared at the ceiling, shadows shifting as headlights passed by outside. Sleep hadn't come easily, not since her voice had spoken the words she hadn't planned to say. I don't feel like I'm part of your life anymore. The sentence echoed over and over, taunting her. That afternoon, she had found herself on Vanessa's public Instagram page. It wasn't private. A carefully curated feed of minimalist architecture, vintage wines, designer sneakers, clever captions. And there, nestled among conference selfies and latte shots, was one image that wouldn't let Clara go. A blurry group photo from their office's charity fun run last month. James stood at the edge, slightly behind Vanessa, both mid-laugh. His hand hovered just behind her waist, not touching, but close enough that her brain filled in the space. She hadn't even remembered him mentioning that event. Clara shut the app and tossed her phone onto the bed, where it bounced once and settled at the edge, its screen gone black. Was she unraveling? Was she seeing things that weren't there? She pressed the heel of her hand to her eyes, pushing back the sting. The next morning, James was already dressed and ready when she walked into the kitchen. He stood at the counter, buttering a slice of toast with mechanical precision. His shirt was tucked too neatly. His tie was straight, his posture sharp. "Morning," he said without turning. Clara pulled open the cupboard, grabbing the jar of tea leaves. "Morning. You need the car today?" he asked, taking a bite. She shook her head. "No. I'll be home editing all day." He nodded. Swallowed. They stood like that for a long beat, him near the sink, her near the stove, the gulf between them silent and cold. Then he exhaled, set the toast down, and finally looked at her. His voice was quieter now. "I've started avoiding her." Clara blinked. "What?" "At work," he said. "Vanessa. I've been trying not to talk to her more than I have to. Just the basics. Just work stuff." She stared at him, unsure whether to be relieved or insulted. "Why?" she asked carefully. James rubbed his brow. "Because I want things to go back to how they were. And I thought maybe if I changed that, we could start fixing this." Clara's arms crossed reflexively. "So you're avoiding her to make me feel better?" "I'm avoiding her," he said, meeting her eyes, "because you don't trust me. And I don't know how else to prove that I haven't done anything wrong." Clara's throat tightened. She looked down at the counter, at the pale speckled granite they had picked out together during the renovation. That had been a good year. So easy. So connected. "I don't want you to avoid your life," she whispered. James stepped forward then, slowly, until only the corner of the island stood between them. "I don't want to feel like the enemy every time I walk in this house." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her chest ached from holding too much in for too long. "I'm exhausted, Clara," he said softly. "I miss you, but I'm not going to beg for a trust one didn't break." He picked up his bag, slung his coat over one arm, and walked to the door. As he reached it, he paused. "If you ever want to talk about what's really going on," he added, "I'll be here." Then he left. The door closed behind him with a sound so soft, it felt like a sigh. But Clara stood frozen in place, her hand resting on the lip of the counter, her tea forgotten. She was no longer sure who was wrong, only that something precious was slipping through her fingers. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Clara's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She had almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her swipe to answer. Hello. A brief pause. Then a voice, soft, clear, professional. Hi, is this Clara Matthews? Clara straightened in her chair. Yes, speaking. This is Vanessa Hale. I hope this isn't a bad time. There was a long silence before Clara found her voice. Vanessa. Yes. I got your number from the company directory. I know this might be a little strange, but I was hoping we could meet. Just to talk. Clara blinked, caught completely off guard. Talk? About what? James. And you. And probably me too. Another pause. I promise I'm not calling to cause more trouble, Vanessa added gently. Quite the opposite, actually. Clara felt her chest tighten. Her first instinct was to say no. To hang up. To protect what little dignity she still felt she had. But something about Vanessa's tone, the calmness, the absence of defensiveness or guilt, stopped her. Okay, Clara said. There's a cafe on Westland and Juniper. 45 minutes. I'll be there. Clara spotted her immediately, sitting by the window, wearing a gray wool coat, her hands wrapped around a cup of something that steamed faintly in the cold light. She looked younger than Clara had imagined, or maybe just softer, less poised than in the photos, more human. Vanessa stood when Clara approached. Thank you for coming. Clara nodded. Saturday. I wasn't sure I should. I understand. For a moment they said nothing, just the clatter of plates in the background, the low hum of conversation around them. Vanessa glanced down, then back up. I think you deserve to know what's true, especially after what I've seen the past few weeks. Clara's brows drew together. What do you mean? I mean, James has been walking on eggshells. Avoiding me. Avoiding half the team, honestly. Like if he's seen talking to me for more than 30 seconds, someone's going to drag him into a courtroom. Clara looked away. Embarrassed. Defensive. I didn't ask him to do that. No, Vanessa said softly. But he clearly felt like he had to. She took a breath. For the record, she continued, I'm engaged. His name is Mateo. We've been together 6 years. I talk about him all the time. James knows him. Hell, James helped me plan his surprise birthday party 2 weeks ago. Clara stared, unblinking. Vanessa gave a rueful smile. Those late nights? We were cramming in pitch edits and putting together a playlist for Mateo's surprise dinner. He's obsessed with earth, wind, and fire. James hated half the list, but he helped anyway. Clara sank back in her chair, color draining from her face. I thought, she began, then stopped. I know what it looked like, Vanessa said. And maybe I should have seen it sooner. How tense he'd get when your name came up. How often he checked the clock, always worried about how late he was getting home. But I promise you, Clara, he never crossed a line. Not even close. Clara opened her mouth again, but no words came. Her mind raced, folding over on itself, retracing every assumption, every imagined moment, every shadow she had mistaken for substance. He talks about you a lot, you know, Vanessa added quietly. Not in the way you probably think. In that way people do when they're trying to protect something. Clara looked down at her hands. She didn't recognize them in that moment. The nervous way her fingers fidgeted, clutched her cup, twisted at the sleeve of her coat. I didn't mean to become this, she said, barely above a whisper. I don't think you are this, Vanessa replied. I think you're hurt, and maybe a little scared. Clara nodded. Slowly. Anyway, Vanessa said, standing. That's all I wanted to say. I hope you two can find your way back to each other. She turned to leave but paused, hand on the back of her chair. And for what it's worth, he's a good man. I've worked with a lot of them. Most are decent. A few are kind. James. He's the rare kind that talks like every word still matters. Don't lose that. Then she was gone, the cafe door swinging gently behind her. Clara sat in stunned silence, surrounded by half-sipped lattes and quiet strangers, the truth settling like warm rain over cold soil. The suspicion, the distance, the coldness, it hadn't been James. It had been the space between them. And she had helped build it. The front door creaked open just after 6, and James stepped inside with the slow, tired movements of a man expecting silence on the other side. He shook the rain from his coat, slipped off his shoes, and placed his bag beside the hallway table, careful not to make a sound. He didn't call out. He didn't expect a greeting. For the past week, the house had felt like neutral ground in a war no one wanted to fight anymore. But tonight, as he walked into the kitchen, Clara was there, standing by the stove, stirring something in a pot. She looked up as he entered. Her face was pale, unreadable. Her hands trembled just slightly over the ladle. James paused in the doorway, his shoulders tightening out of habit. "Hey," he said cautiously. Clara turned off the burner. "Hi." They stared at each other for a moment. Two people still married, but frayed by all the words that had never been said in time. She reached for the drawer, pulled out 2 bowls, and set them on the table. "Dinner's ready." James hesitated. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she interrupted gently. He moved to the table, pulled out his chair, and sat. The food smelled familiar. Chicken and rosemary, something she used to make when they both worked late and wanted something warm that didn't come in a takeout box. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Each bite felt like the careful turning of a page neither was sure they were ready to read. Then Clara set her spoon down, folded her hands in front of her, and looked at him, really looked. "I met with Vanessa." James froze. "I didn't plan to." She called. Asked to talk. He said nothing, his jaw tightening just a little, unsure if this was about to collapse or resolve. Clara's voice was quieter now. "She told me about her fiancé, about the party you helped her plan, about the playlist you hated." He looked down, a breath escaping in something that was almost a laugh. "She told me how careful you were," Clara continued. "How much you talk about me. How you never once gave her, or anyone, reason to think you weren't exactly who you said you were." Silence fell again. Then she reached across the table and laid her hand lightly on his. "I'm sorry, James." His eyes met hers, slow, searching. He didn't speak right away, and when he did, his voice was hoarse. "For what exactly?" "For not trusting you. For letting my imagination become louder than your truth. For hurting you while convincing myself I was the one being hurt." She paused. "For forgetting who you are." James looked down at their joined hands. His thumb brushed the side of hers slowly. The weight of weeks, of suspicion, of separation, of sleeping apart, pressed down on the table between them. "I didn't know what else to do," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You looked at me like I was a stranger." Clara nodded, tears rising. "I looked at you through fear," she said. "I think I got scared that maybe someone else would see what I saw when I first met you." James let out a breath. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "I only ever saw you." She stood then, stepped around the table, and lowered herself into his lap without a word. He wrapped his arms around her instinctively, burying his face in her shoulder, the warmth of her finally returning to his skin. "I missed you," she whispered. "I never left," he said. They sat there, holding on to each other like survivors. No fireworks, no dramatic music. Just two people, quiet and imperfect, trying again. Outside, the rain softened to mist, and the house, finally, felt like home again. 6 weeks later, winter had melted into early spring. The last of the frost had vanished from the lawn, and the cherry blossom tree in the Matthews' front yard was beginning to show pale pink buds again, cautious but persistent. Clara stood at the window, her fingers wrapped loosely around a mug of chamomile tea. She watched James outside, bent over the flower bed in his hoodie and jeans, coaxing life back into the garden. He hadn't touched it since October, but this morning he'd woken up early and asked where she kept the trowel. There was a peace in his movements now, unhurried, present. Inside, the house had changed in small, subtle ways. The guest room bed was made again, untouched since the night Clara sat on its edge and cried alone. The dinner table had candles on it now, half-burned, leftovers from a date night they'd invented just for them. Thursday pasta, jazz playing low, phones left on the counter. They were still finding their way back to each other. There were quiet stumbles, lingering hesitations, but the tone of their voices had softened. The space between them, once crowded with tension, had been cleared. Conversation had returned to the kind that didn't need purpose. Shared thoughts, jokes half-finished but understood anyway. One night, Clara had found James in the kitchen singing under his breath as he made toast. It had stopped her cold. Not because of the song, but because he was singing again. They'd started couples therapy 2 weeks ago, an idea James had brought up one evening, his voice cautious but hopeful. "I think we're good," he had said. "But we could be better. Stronger." Clara had said yes without hesitation. And it was working. Slowly, awkwardly, but working. In those sessions, they spoke truths they hadn't known they'd buried. Clara admitted how invisible she had felt, how quietly scared she'd become of losing him to the parts of his life that didn't include her. James admitted how deeply it had wounded him to be doubted, and how helpless he'd felt trying to fix something he didn't fully understand. The wounds were still there, but healing, like skin after a deep cut, still pink and tender, but no longer raw. This morning, Clara opened her inbox and found an email from Vanessa. "Matteo and I finally set a date. You and James better be there. I need him to veto our wedding playlist again. And I want to meet the woman he won't shut up about." Winking face. Clara smiled. Later that evening, James came inside with dirt under his nails and the beginnings of a sunburn on the back of his neck. Clara met him in the kitchen, handed him a glass of water, and kissed him without a word. It was the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything. It simply gave. They stood there, forehead to forehead, not needing to speak. Because now, everything that had once gone unsaid was slowly, patiently, being said again. On their 9th anniversary, Clara and James sat on the porch swing as the sun dipped behind the trees. No fancy plans, no glittering gifts. Just wine, laughter, and an old photo album on Clara's lap. One they hadn't opened in years. James pointed at a picture of them on the beach, years ago, younger and a little drunk on vacation cocktails. "God, look at us," he said. "We thought we had all the answers." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Maybe we do now." James didn't reply. He just reached for her hand and held it, not like he was afraid to lose it, but like he knew exactly what it was worth. And she held it back, steady and sure. Together, they had crossed the storm. And now, they were learning to live in the sunlight again.